Good evening, everyone. Great to have you out again tonight for our second Startup Grind event. I'd like to introduce our speaker for you this evening. Patrick Giesbrecht is the principal of Giesbrecht & Co. and has spent the last 16 years working with businesses, not-for-profits, building and executing communication strategies, with the last 9 years focused on advocating for worthy community projects and property developments. Just up to a couple of weeks ago, Patrick was the chair of the BC Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and as such, he brings a province-wide network of businesses, investors, influencers, experts, and decision-makers to his professional world. Pat's expertise includes creating a credible narrative that accurately communicates a project's value to the community at large, and he has a knack for bringing diverse groups together, building a coalition of support behind projects he believes in. He brews his own craft beer.
Not bad, too.
It's good?
Apparently.
Okay. And enjoys locally sourced food and beverages, and he enjoys snowboarding, collecting vinyl recordings, and golfs. He and his wife Summer have 4 kids. Let's have a round of applause for Patrick Giesbrecht. Thanks for coming tonight, Patrick. Good to see you again.
Mike, should I be using the mic? Can everyone hear me okay? Is that fine, or would you rather I mic up?
You've got
You'd rather I
mic
mic
there.
up? Okay.
Yeah, it's good to use it.
Okay.
Okay,
Check.
All right.
Test. Are we good?
we're good, I
Okay.
think, yeah. So Pat, we'd like to get to know you a little bit, other than what I've just mentioned to everybody. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about life growing up, where it happened, family life, that sort of thing.
Okay, sure. So I had a bit of this discussion from some, was it you, Bobby? Yeah, we were chatting about so I grew up in Mount Lehman. And of course, that's the birthplace of Abbotsford, just in case anybody's wondering. And the people crawled up the hill out of the river, and Abbotsford was born. And he asked if that's somewhere close to Bradner, and I said, no. Bradner is the mortal enemy on the soccer pitch, for sure. And historically, it was the yellow shirts and the red shirts. And yeah, so lots of family there. My two sides of my family moved in the 50s and the 60s. Into Abbotsford. Obviously, as you can tell from my last name, I'm of Mennonite descent, and although I've spent the last 40-some years recovering from that, but you know the drill. No, that's okay. Grew up in a closed version of a Mennonite community. And,
You want to be careful with that here, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Similar to Abbotsford in that regard. Grew up in a closed community. And so attended a little private school out in Mount Lehman. Weren't really a part of the community at large, and so my entrance into the community happened in my late teens when I got into the workforce, and then in my early 20s I ended up moving away from that version of practice, and in a lot of ways felt like an immigrant in a lot of ways, because I was entering into a new world, a new community that I hadn't in a lot of ways hadn't been a part of, right? So we had this theology around being in the world but not of the world, and so there was a sort of barrier between us and them, and so we didn't vote, and we didn't have recorded music and didn't have TV and all that kind of stuff, right? And so. Yeah, it's been a metamorphosis. It's been a journey. It's been a lot of fun. So that was my upbringing, and my mom right now. I just got to say this. My mom just found out 2 days ago her cancer came back, and so just as a family, we're going through all of that. She's in St. Paul's tonight, and not looking good. And so just I don't know why I thought of that right now. I guess just reflecting on the circle of life and all of that stuff.
Well, that's. I'm sure that's on your mind a lot during the day.
For sure.
I'm sure.
She's this 5'1", Mennonite lady that makes everything from scratch, interestingly enough, also flew a plane. Like, go figure. yeah, there's a whole story there, but
Okay.
but this you know, the background I just explained, and this short little lady who ended up flying for fun, just a pleasure pilot's license, and yeah, coming to the end of her days. Yeah.
And so you grew up, I'm sure, eating awesome stuff. Lots of pickles and preserves
Yeah.
and great bread.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nice. What did young Pat like to do for enjoyment? Like hobbies? You mentioned it.
Yeah.
Life in the family
Yeah.
and in that community was a little interesting. But
Yeah.
what did you enjoy doing if you had a little time to
Yeah.
yourself?
Lots of street hockey. Lots of so and again, someone here might relate to this. I don't know, but musical instruments were considered taboo. So we did a lot of vocal singing. So loved that. That was one of our pastimes. I sort of expanded upon that later on in life when I left some of that conditioning behind. But music is a huge part of my life, huge part of growing up, huge part of the social fabric of that community. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did the entrepreneur bug begin to bite you or nibble at you, and how did all that happen? Especially coming out of that community.
Yeah. Well, when I was, I think it was 8, I did my first roadside stand. You know, and my uncle came along and bought me out of all the onions that I had. So that was my first foray into commerce. But for real, I always thought my conditioned self, that's a term I learned from my wife, my conditioned self was, really risk adverse, very fearful. I thought I was more of an administrator.
Yeah.
Never, ever saw myself as someone who would develop business or would sell anything or would ever pitch anything. That was way too risky, way too scary, right? And so I kind of ended up in business by default. I ended up as a silent partner in a business that got way out of hand in terms of what we would scope and what we were trying to do really quickly, and I had the need to save it. I had to kind of jump in and raise some money and put a team together, and I learned a ton. And the investor, the person who brought the most money to the table, ended up matching me with a mentor who was like, had cut his teeth selling photocopiers. Just to give you right.
That's a tough business.
And so this guy was my mentor, and taught me a whole lot about breaking through, taught me a whole lot about how to deal with rejection or perceived rejection, how I projected my own view of the world, the sort of us against them that I grew up with. A lot of judgment, obviously, I grew up with, right? A lot of false perception of other people judging me, right, in terms of who I was and my capabilities and all that kind of stuff. Helped me break through a lot of that. And there's another quote just comes to mind. I heard not too long ago, and that was, I used to walk into a room and wonder if people were going to like me. Now I walk into a room and I wonder if I'm going to like them. Right? And it's just a totally different perspective in terms of being able to break through that fear and really live life on your own terms. And as opposed to positioning everything. And this happens for those of you who sell or who raise capital or who put deals together. How do I put this thought into words? There's something about being able to retain your personal power, and I mean that in a good way, but in an exchange where, there will be this point in a transaction where you will feel it slipping away. You don't know if you're going to get the deal done, and in that moment, it is so easy to see yourself as the weaker party, the one that must compromise, that must give in order to close the deal, as opposed to standing firm, maybe losing the sale, or a lot of times not, and growing from that and learning from that. And I remember I had a mentor once who told me, he said the best thing you can ever do is fire a client. because what'll happen, he says, first of all, you send a message out to your community and the universe of what you're worth and what you're going to put up with. And he said the second thing is your self-esteem goes through the roof, your confidence goes through the roof, and you start, you know, moving through these, I'll use the word transaction, but relationships on your own terms, as opposed to constantly looking in the mirror and trying to, you know, govern oneself from what you think the other person is looking from you. Yeah. So that was a huge part of the upbringing, was just dealing with that, because obviously we were under a lot of scrutiny. And the day that I was able to cut free and go, you know what, not everybody has to like me. Not everybody, I'm the only person responsible for my happiness. No one else lies awake at night worrying about me.
Yeah.
You know, that's left solely up to me, right? And so that was a very freeing thing. When I'm the person that I live for, and then beyond that, you know, my wife and my kids and so forth, right? As opposed to some other group somewhere. Who knows? You know, we're all trying to figure out, a lot of people trying to figure out who they're actually living for. And I think that's a real key actually in entrepreneurialism, because yes, we are absolutely serving our customers, and yes, we're absolutely supposed to be filling a need, filling a niche. But if we're not doing that from a position of strength and from a position of inner sort of, you know, core of, well, let me put it this way. Most entrepreneurs are ridiculed by their peers at some point or another. They're a true entrepreneur. They're being told they're, what, irresponsible, crazy, haven't thought things through, taking way too many risks, right?
That's right.
That's just a few.
Yeah.
And so at some point you've got to be able to dig down and say, you know, first of all, be humble enough to learn from this criticism that's coming, or this critique, but at the end of the day, be able to steer your way through to going, no, I am going to do this, and I might not have it all figured out, but I'm not stopping, I'm not quitting.
Yeah, that's great, Patrick. And of course, that's why getting together in groups like this and being able to talk about our challenges, our struggles, our joys, we understand each other for the most part. And often family, friends, they don't understand it, because we're a little different, aren't we? For the most part. Yeah. So that's
Well,
important.
entrepreneurialism can be a really lonely life.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand why we do what we do.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm the youngest of 4 boys, and they're all either lawyers or professors or something like that. And I talk about things at the dinner table of family dinners. They're talking about other things, and I want to talk about something else. We get along great for an hour, and after a while, we just start to kind of separate like oil and water. You know, we talk about different stuff. You know, but yeah, being an entrepreneur certainly is different. Any advice you would like to have been given prior to starting some of your first couple of ventures? Things that you would like to have known before getting into this business of running businesses?
Well, you know, I think, so sticking with the theme of having a strong core and, you know, believing in yourself and what it is you're going to do in your team and what have you. There was a time probably back about 10, 15 years ago, I was listening to a lot of and reading a lot of Dan Kennedy material. I don't know if that name means anything to any of you, right? And this idea of essentially deciding what it is you want your business to look like and therefore your life to look like, and then just working backwards.
Yeah.
As opposed to what your business looks like and what your life becomes as an output, right? And I think I would have made significantly less mistakes had I known that when I started. And so, again, it's about a power shift. It's about a balance of autonomy, if you will, or just recognizing. I remember him telling the story about this guy who, you know, he was in the seminar business, and he decided, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all my seminars are going to be down in the Florida Keys, and I'm not going to wear a suit, and I'm not going to do this, not going to do that, not going to do that. This is back in the seminar days, right?
Yeah.
They were popular. And interestingly enough, of course, his positioning really worked really well for him, because it was a great filtering mechanism for him, because he had to fight to get out to this place where he held his seminars. Okay, exclusivity. He didn't quote unquote need anybody because he did it on his terms, and people were attracted to what he was doing.
Yeah.
It was like brilliant, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't. He didn't do it by design. He sat down and went, "What do I want my life to look like? How do I want to make money? What do I want that, if it's great to make money, but if I'm spending all my time making my money, then I'm
Yeah.
not left." I mean, time is the new commodity.
Yeah.
Right? If you read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, that is the new currency, is time.
Yeah.
And millennials have that figured out like nobody's business.
Yeah.
They don't. It's not about income. It's not even about take home. It's
Yeah.
about the fun that I'm having and the hours that I have
Yeah.
left.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the new currency for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, being rich in time.
Yeah.
And having the finances to finance my life,
Yep.
even just enough, if that's what's important to you.
Yeah. Or you just
Yeah.
do it with your parents' money.
But I like Tim Ferriss's idea of taking multiple mini retirements.
Can I move forward on this? Is this
Yeah.
okay? Okay.
Yeah. So Pat, you, I remember a number of years ago when you became very involved in the chamber. I've known Pat for about 15 years, and I don't remember you talking about the chamber much, maybe 15, 16 years ago. At what point did you get involved in the chamber, and what was the catalyst for that?
Well, first of all, it was an opportunity to connect with other business people. I had a real interest there. I was looking for like-minded people I could connect with. I was looking for people I could potentially do business with. I was at a point where I was looking at bringing some awareness to the business that I'd started, and so it seemed like a good way to do that. But what really hooked me, and which is really the progression of where my career, where business went for me, was this idea of together we can do more. I think, and so I've always had an interest in politics, which is much to the chagrin of my parents. That's it, but it's something that I really enjoyed, and so this ability to this body, which then we lobbied local and provincial and then eventually federal governments on behalf of the business community, I found it a lot of fun, and my personal sort of hardwiring personality and skill set was a really good fit for that. And so what I found was that where in my earlier days I was quote unquote selling things, I took that same skill set and just repurposed it a little bit, and became more of an advocate for causes, essentially. Right? A lot of the same soft skills, but a different focus, and that's where I took my my career. My focus went in that direction. I have a lot more fun putting a team together and advocating on behalf of something larger than it's really boring just selling your own thing. I find it that way anyways.
Okay.
I find it it's really boring. I don't, it's not a lot of fun. I like to be involved in something that's much bigger than just me. So I would say that was the chamber, that was the appeal at the chamber, was beginning to influence local policy or the business conditions. I mean, that is essentially what the chamber is all about, right? It represents their members, the local mom-and-pop Main Street businesses, to first of all their local level of government around land use issues and taxation and garbage pickup and recycling and like all of that, all that kind of stuff, and then on to the provincial level around income tax and interprovincial trade barriers and all of those kinds of things. And you get involved all kinds of fun stuff like how policing affects small business and crime reduction and homelessness and all of these factors. I've always said that you can if you dig into any one issue 6 inches deep, and it ties into business somehow. It just does, right? And so there's this idea that somehow business and social issues are mutually exclusive is a fallacy, complete fallacy, which I think is what's so cool about where social enterprise now is doing some really cool stuff. And I think Jove, you're doing something along those lines. Where is he? There you are, right? Where you're bringing social cause, you're using business talents and commerce to affect change in a very real way. And I used to get criticized when I came up through the Abbotsford Chamber ranks, so I was the Abbotsford Chamber president back a number of years ago. we got criticized. We're like, why are you guys getting involved in the homelessness debate? Like, you know, and it was because we had members whose retail outlets were greatly affected by the fact that we had people, you know, living on the streets. And so the first thought is, oh well, the business community. Oh yeah, the business community. We know where they're at. You know, they're just going to want to, you know, get them out of here, lock them up, get them. And you know, we understood. We had some really good people on our board. We were represented. We had someone from the Salvation Army who was involved in outreach, and we had other people with legal backgrounds, and we knew that wasn't going to solve anything. We really had to look at root causes, and we were looking at societal issues and addictions and all of this kind of stuff. And you know, we were doing this as a chamber of commerce, and people kind of looked at us like, "What are you guys doing?" But at the end of the day, we believed in it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And one of the first property projects that I was involved in advocating for was a low barrier men's housing facility, and that was a brutal neighborhood fight, if you will, because there was a group of small businesses in essentially in Chilliwack refers to it as their BIA. So it's a group of businesses in a downtown core, which is often where these homeless issues take place, right?
Yeah.
And there was the surrounding community was going, okay, we have to do something about this. And so my firm was hired to handle some of the PR and some of the local government relations and lobbying on that facility. And that facility is now built, and people are moving into it or have moved into it, and guys are coming off. It's a men's house specifically, coming off the street. But it was controversial from the point of view that you could move into that without actually being clean or dry first, right? So that's it's a different model.
Yep.
And so the pushback from that part of the community was intense. And that's where I cut my teeth on you know, land use, property development, that kind of stuff. But love that stuff. And at the end of the day, when you can marry a social cause with you know, make a few bucks to pay the bills with it, that's like the sweet spot. Yeah.
Interesting. So in situations like that, if you don't mind me asking this question, who compensates you? Who's hiring you in situations like that? Maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about Giesbrecht and Co.
Oh, nice accent. Well done.
Yeah, well, thank you. I've been saying your name for a few years. So how did that begin, and who hires you? And because it's an interesting business model that I think people would enjoy hearing about.
Well, I can say now how we were paid. We didn't even know right in the beginning, but we figured it out. Our client was a local nonprofit that was going to be building this facility. It was a partnership with the provincial government. We found out later we were being paid by the provincial government to wage this ground war on their behalf, because they wanted to spend this money, and Rich Coleman wanted to get these houses built, and he knew he was having this in a number of different communities. He was getting this pushback from mostly, you know, and again, here I am, chamber hat on, right? But the pushback was mostly coming from local small businesses who didn't understand that if we gave people the dignity of a roof over their head and a way to be safe and secure, it would actually help clean up a community. Their line that they trotted out was that if you build a house, you're just going to attract more, and then the drug dealers and you know, the sex trade workers and all that kind of stuff are going to congregate here, and that's counterintuitive. And so that was the kind of the messaging war that we were in, right? And so I refer to my firm as a PR/GR firm, so public relations and local government relations. I'm not a federal lobbyist by any means, and I've always said that's another thing we've learned at the Chamber of Commerce, is that any one of us, business-wise or otherwise, the level of government that affects our daily lives by far the most is our local level of government, and yet we pay it the least amount of attention. And so from parking to, you know, street lighting, to cleaning the snow off, you know, to property taxation, to business licenses, to building permits, to all of those things are all controlled at the local level. And provincially, it was like PST, income tax, WCB standard, you know what I mean? Like like our day-to-day troubles, if you will, challenges are mostly at the local level. And so what ended up happening was I came through the time with the Abbotsford Chamber, and I just started getting phone calls from people going, hey, you you probably know somebody who could. That's kind of how the conversation would start, right?
Yeah.
And I realized, I told myself at one point, I'm like, man, if I could figure out how to do what I do, advocating on behalf of other people's stuff, issues, and helping them turn no's into yeses, if I could figure out how to do that and get paid for that, I would have died and gone to heaven. I would really, really like that. And so that's what happened. I just started getting phone calls on that. I turned that in. I went, like I said, I repurposed a skill set that I already had, and that became my new product, or service. And I just figured out a way to charge for it. And then after a few years, went, you know what? Working with nonprofits is really fulfilling and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I need to balance my caseload out with market housing and for-profit property development, because I'm talking with the same people, and those guys can afford to pay a little more than
sure,
right.
Sure.
So now I work with essentially what ends up happening is I get called in when there's a contentious or difficult situation. So there's a rezoning application and there's people that are upset that something like that's going to get built in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Or the best kind of client is one who recognizes that they want to be proactive. There is no pushback at this point, and they want to make sure that they manage anything ahead of time. And so then I step in and we'll do some relationship management. We'll create a credible narrative around what this project is going to do, who's going to get helped, what it's going to mean to the community. We'll figure out some a way to give back to the community in some way through amenities or experience or something, right? Sponsorships, that kind of thing, and then work with the decision makers and the influencers, and at the end of the day, give them a reason to say yes. Yeah. Right. It's give them. It's just another version of selling a product, if you will. It's selling someone else's project. Is really what it is. So that's my business is in a nutshell. Yeah.
Sounds exciting. Yeah, I know that you love to do those things. I've known Pat for a number of years, and he has created a number of, I guess you could say, win-win situations with some incredibly creative ideas. And Pat, I don't know if you have some little stories that you might be able to share with us about some win-win relationships, opportunities that you were able to create or witness, whether in business or in government, because I know you've been involved in a number of very interesting creative situations. Some things that really turned out really well for everybody involved.
So let me just, sit on that one for a second.
Sure.
And I don't want to manufacture something in the moment, but it'll happen.
Sure.
So carry on, and I'll come back to that.
Sure. Well, I was going to ask you, I think it's safe to say that a lot of us, certainly me included, don't really understand what the Chamber does. We think about networking events, golf tournaments, things like that. If I was to get involved in the local chamber here in Chilliwack, what sort of things might I do? What sort of opportunities might I have to actually influence change locally or provincially? What sort of things could I get involved in? How would it benefit me as a business person and maybe being an influence in my community?
Well, I think you touched on the key there at the end. I think that most people attend groups like this, cutting to the chase, and or the chamber, to potentially get business, get referrals, that kind of stuff. And that becomes their goal as opposed to an indirect outcome. So I remember when I was contemplating running for the BC Chamber Board, I went to a guy who was in a similar line of work to what I was doing, different venue, but he had a similar type of business, let's just say. And he had recently been the chair of the BC Chamber, and his business was, he was telling me how it had grown and how well it had gone for him and all this kind of stuff. And so I said, look, this is my business, this is what I'm doing. I'm thinking about making this step. What do you think? I just want just give me some good, solid feedback. And he said, well, here's the thing. He's like, look, he said, yes, because I told him, I said, look, I have to think about my business. I'd love to be able to just say, hey, I can pour into this and it doesn't matter if there's anything that comes back. It doesn't matter. But I can't. I don't have that luxury. I really got to think about how this is going to be synergistic. But I said, but I also know that it doesn't, obviously, you can't walk in business card first, and you know, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he gave me some really good advice. He just said, look, he said, of course, he said, we're all here to build our businesses. There's no question. So that's certainly, I mean, first and foremost, profit is a good word in the Chamber of Commerce world, right? There's no problem with that whatsoever. But where I see businesses or individuals, guys and gals, that really do well being involved in the Chamber of Commerce world is where they come and they offer value first.
Yep.
And so what I have found personally is that being able, so remember the community that I came from, right? Nobody knew who I was.
Yep.
My parents were good people. They weren't super connected, right? We just didn't have, I didn't go to graduate with all the guys that were running businesses in Abbotsford. Like, I was an unknown entity. They didn't know who I was. And so for me, the Chamber platform was a great place to build credibility, and then therefore relationships, and then therefore influence. So I'm a big fan of finding a cause or a group that you can sort of throw your shoulder behind the plow, right? And I've always said that you build the best relationships around some kind of either trauma or hard work or success or challenge. Like that's where real relationships are forged, right? That's where you truly find out what someone else is like.
Yeah.
So out of those environments, so I look for places where I could just add a lot of value, where there was a big challenge. And one of the things that happened in Abbotsford, and I don't think there's anybody really super involved in the Chamber of Commerce here, right? They're all busy at Frankie's tonight, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, but I was the chair at the time, and we had this situation. I had to, I became the guy that had to fire the senior staff person at that point. And so it was a huge, because of how it happened and who he was and everything. This is years and years ago, so nobody knows who he is. So I'm not, like, don't worry, nobody. I'm not saying anything I shouldn't say. But it ended up being one of those moments where I had an opportunity to really build a relationship with a lot of good people who were on my board. And we learned so much about each other. And we went through a time where we could have really, really had burnish the image, if you will, of the Chamber based on how we would handle this, right? And because we had such a strong team, I had a lawyer on my board, I had a communications professional, I had a retired politician, or a recovering politician as he called himself. I had a few other individuals with that skill set. Oh, and then I had a retired newspaper editor as well. So when you put that skill set together, I mean, we hit it out of the park. I only got the credit because I happened to be the chair of the board. It all belonged to the rest of them. Yeah. But that was a defining moment. And so I look back at that and I go, like, I now, in my career, I look for, I have to admit, I look for situations like that, not to fire people, but I look for situations to solve a problem that other people are shrinking away from. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So if there's an organization that needs some help, or they've got a challenge, and you can step in and make a difference, it's a great way to build credibility. And in the Chamber of Commerce, it ebbs and flows in community by community. Sometimes they're in favor and they've got great leadership, and sometimes they aren't. They have to sort of find their way back, and but generally speaking, it's a good brand. Yeah. And so I found that it was an excellent brand, excellent platform to from which to launch. And I used to joke, and like, so how does the Chamber? Someone would ask me that question back when I was running small business in Abbotsford, and I'd say, well, all it really is it people look at it as one more reason why I won't run off with their money, right? Because that's just one more. Oh yeah, we know who you are. We know who you know. We know where you live. Kind of thing, right? So we think we can trust you a little bit more. So it was a credibility bump for sure. But then when I went from the local level to the provincial level, then what it did was it really opened. First of all, the relationship sphere just exploded, and because you're taking leaders from individual communities around the province and you're putting them all in one room, right? Yeah. And so, it's a really good, it's a great environment. And what I found was I matured as I went along that path, because in order to continue going where I wanted to in terms of, eventually my goal was to become the chair of the BC Chamber Board, and I'll talk in a second about why I wanted to do that. But I needed to hone my skills in order to go from one level to the next. So in other words, what got me elected in Abbotsford was not what got me elected to the BC board. Does that make sense? So the venue changed, and so the skill set that I was going to use and the techniques and strategies had to be different. So it was a great learning experience. So this is twofold. One is you grow a ton on your own, and you learn a lot about yourself, and you fail, and you pick yourself up, and you shake it off, and you figure it out, and you move forward. And on the other hand, you meet just a lot of really good people, and if you can do some good work along the way, then for me it was my in Abbotsford and in other places, I am synonymous.
Yeah,
Thank you.
go.
Synonymous with that was a word we didn't use growing up in that community.
Sure.
That wasn't a word we used. I'm just kidding. With the Chamber of Commerce. I was like, oh, you're the chamber guy. I'd show up, I'd be asked to, something was opening or some school thing was happening or a graduating class or whatever, and I'd get asked to come and say something on behalf of the business community, right? And be like, oh, you're that chamber guy, and it stuck. And it was for me, so if someone's looking, someone here tonight, I guess the takeaway is someone's going, look, I know that in order to build my business, I need to be able to sort of, if I want to have influence and all of what I can use that in a good way, a group like that can be a fabulous way to lend credibility to you and give you a chance to hone your skills and build your your own personal brand.
Right, great. Now, thanks for that. Maybe we could talk a little bit about influence, becoming a center of influence. How and why is that important? Because I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs, it's something I think especially maybe in the last 5, 6, 7 years. There's a lot of books have been written, and it just seems to be escalating. Let's talk about the importance of becoming a center of influence. What does it mean exactly? So,
a mentor that you and I both know and worked with, he used to say, there's two ways to trying to remember how he would set this up, but essentially, I'll just put it in my words. You could either go to the vineyard and grab a basket and pick the grapes one by one and fill your basket and take it home, or you go and cut a deal with the owner of the vineyard, right? And then his people go and put them all in baskets, and right,
something like that.
So it's this idea of the larger one's network, the greater their worth, and so. Okay, I have to share this. So I'm sure there's lots of House of Cards fans here. I'm a huge House of Cards fan. You can't do what I do for a living and not like House of Cards. Frank Underwood said, when given the chance, he said, if you're given the choice of money or power, he said, you take power every time. And when the first time I heard that, I thought, and of course he's like so morally compromised and evil and it's really bad. So like, don't take this to the bank in a good way, or in a bad way. But that holds true. Money comes and money goes. But influence will always make you more money if you wield the sword right well. So influence is trust. It can be perverted into manipulation and what's the extortion, essentially, right? Which is the sort of the flip side of that coin. But true influence is trust, and it's a very sacred thing. And the more influence you have, the more valuable you are to your customers, your partners, your competition, and all of this stuff. And we can talk about collaboration in a little bit. But for me, as I looked at this is where, I remember I was a Big Brother back in the day, and I'm a big what's the word? Affirmations guy, right? That's one of my main love languages. So thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. That really spoke to me. I'm just kidding. But I remember when I was a Big Brother, remember thinking, okay, I'm going to do the 10 years because I see what the 10-year guys get. They get this big plaque, and I want that in my office. And it was kind of funny, but it was honestly, it was something that I looked at, like 10 years. I got to hit 10 years. Of course, I was investing in young guys, and I was spending time with them and doing all that stuff, and that was, I loved that as well. But there was something about that recognition of the 10 years that really spoke to me. It did. It's just how I'm wired, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm on the BC board, and I'm angling for, the way it works is you get elected to the board from around the province, but then the board chooses their vice chair, and that's sometimes hotly contested. And then the vice chair, there's an automatic progression. You go vice chair, chair, past chair, and then off, right?
Yep.
So the board selects the vice chair. So I was angling for my, to get elected as vice chair, and I looked in the boardroom in Vancouver. They got the pictures on the wall of the last about 60 chairs. So 1-year term, and some of those people are people we've never heard of, never, names mean nothing, but there's the odd one sprinkled in there that we recognize. And so back in the about 75, Bill Van Der Zan was the chair of the BC Chamber of Commerce. And in about 92 or 3, Steve Thompson, who's now the Speaker of the House, was just as of a couple days ago, was the chair of the BC Chamber. In fact, he installed me, which is kind of cool. I'm enjoying watching his career. Naomi Yamamoto, who is an MLA in North Van, she's a past chair, and on it goes, right?
Yeah.
And so I looked to those guys and I went, okay, if they went from here, their local chamber, BC board, became the chair, Kootenai Bill Bennett, I'm just thinking of another one, who's now retired, but was the energy minister for years and years. He made it to vice chair, and then he resigned to win his nomination and run in the provincial election. And I just thought, if this is the path to where those folks have gone, I think there's something there. And so, call it shallow if you want, call it whatever you like. I don't know. I'm just being honest about what I thought when I looked up at that wall, and when I was sort of right working at that position. So for me, those folks have all attained incredible influence, and they use it for good, in my view. And they've built our economy, and people trust them, and people do what they want them to do. But the only reason why any one person has any amount of influence is because they've got an army of people behind them that trust them and they can mobilize. When you think about it from a leadership point of view, right? The only way you really have any power of any kind is if you have a whole group of people who believe in you and who trust you. That's it.
That's it. People believing in you, trusting in you. That's the goal of building influence.
So there are other past chairs, I have to say, that
Yeah.
have very little influence, didn't handle things well,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
Like they had their platform, they had their opportunity, and they blew it. And there's lots of those. So there's way, way more of those, actually.
Interesting. So Pat, we've got about 15 minutes here to go. Maybe talk a little bit about collaboration. I think that's an important thing for all of us to hear about.
Yeah.
Collaboration, creating win-win scenarios, win-win opportunities.
Yeah. Okay.
And is there a strategy behind it that's not so difficult to follow?
So, so in my business now, my business is built on finding win-wins.
Yeah.
Built on it. I put partnerships together between First Nations communities and the development community, between the business community and First Nations and governments, and back and forth, local governments is what I'm referring to. And there's an old adage, I forget who said it, you'll be able to tell me who said it, but basically you can have, Zig Ziglar, right? You can get anything you want out of life if you help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah.
So that's my core belief. The only way I'm going to convince you to do what it is that I need to achieve my goal is there's got to be something in it for you.
Yeah.
If there's nothing in it for you, then I'm either threatening you or I'm manipulating you in some way, right? Like,
Diluted.
yeah, here you go. So there has to be a win for you,
Yeah.
and there has to be a significant one. And if we're going to do stuff on a sustainable basis, it has to be ongoing. So.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly putting together what I refer to as symbiotic relationships. So one of my I'll just give you a quick example. macro level, and then we'll talk about a couple micro levels. So one of my clients is a First Nation who has signed on support of the Kinder Morgan pipeline.
Okay.
As such, in their area, they are one of only 2 nations that will get a first shot at the procurement on that piece of the line, like a significant amount of business that if they have the parties, if they have the workforce, if they have the skills, they'll be able to build huge amounts of that pipe on that section of pipeline, because Kinder Morgan has an indigenous business, indigenous people's procurement strategy, right? Which I think is awesome. Huge fan of that.
Yep.
The challenge is this nation is about 90 people strong, and most of them are gainfully employed in other ways.
Yeah.
And some of them are retired, and some of them are still in school. And like, there's just no way they can pull that off.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm talking about again about leveraging a brand, so or a standing or a platform, right? So we have this nation who has signed a support letter in return for procurement opportunities. It's just sitting there. And who knows what's going to happen around the province, but it looks like the line is going to move forward one way or the other. It looks like it will. It may not, but at this point, right, where we sit today, it's looking like it's probably too far gone for the provincial government to actually kill it. Trudeau will probably make it happen. It's just my guess. So we've got businesses now who are wanting to get a piece of this action. So we've got people with their hand on the switch, or the lever, if you will, that don't have the ability to complete or to facilitate their order, but they're like the way in. They're like the gatekeeper. And so what I'm doing is I'm matching worthy businesses for that project, putting together JV partnerships with this nation. So they're going to make some money from their positioning, their status.
Yes.
And the businesses are going to get an opportunity to bid on a project, or sole source in some cases, just depending, simply because they're going to share a portion of that profit with the First Nation, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very simple JV, joint venture. It's win-win-win.
Yeah.
Kinder Morgan builds a very socially responsible piece of infrastructure and meet their goals that they were told they had to meet in order to get their approvals.
Yeah.
So they win. Obviously our overall economy wins. The First Nation wins because they're finally getting a little piece of land that they used to use for, and I might be stepping on some people's toes. I don't care. It's the reality. They have standing through the courts for this, and that pendulum, by the way, is going to continue to swing. So from my view, it behooves every one of us to have really good relationships with Indigenous-based businesses, because that's where it's going even more, right? And I believe strongly in the need to reconcile. I really do. I think we've given them a really rough ride for 150 years, and it's time to change that. But anyways, that's a whole other soapbox. So they're winning by being able to get a piece of that economic activity, and the local non-Indigenous owned business is going to win big time as well. So that's sort of the micro or macro level, right? The big picture. On the small, I'm going to share an example. Now is where I'm going to share one of that story that I mentioned before, okay? So on the micro level, thinking about small businesses, you guys are all, you've got your, well, some of you are not so small. Some of you guys are running some significant businesses, doing significant volume. So when I refer to small business, I'm just talking, 50 employees and less kind of thing, right? I don't mean to disrespect anybody. I used to work with a lot of small businesses, coaching them this is kind of in another lifetime, but or another expression of what I do, where I was helping them with business development and with marketing. And so we'd have two small businesses with clientele, good service product, both duking it out, trying to make a living. And I don't know if you guys agree with this, but so many small business owners that I rub shoulders with or mix with tend to be, insecure is the wrong word, but tend to view self-absorbed maybe. It's not the word I'm looking for. That may be true too, but they tend to see other really like they really take competition really seriously. And they very easily feel sort of competitive with and sometimes it's not even with their actual competitor, but it's they feel like they're competing for the same dollars as that business guy next to them, right? And we always used to say, your competition is your best friend. Like, seriously, it's your best friend. And so here we are. So here's how I view the world, right? I see a business owner with clients that are coming in and they're selling them things and they hope they come back and they sell them more stuff. And then I see business owner B selling a very different product and service to those very same people.
Yeah.
And these two guys never talk to each other,
Yeah.
right? Never collaborate. I should say never, but rarely.
Yeah.
And so what we used to tell people is, okay, we give them the example of the restaurant and the day spa, right? And the restaurant owner is going, man, I'd really like to have more people in my restaurant. And the day spa owner is going, really like to have more people in my day spa. So the restaurant owner goes to the day spa owner, goes, hey, listen, do you agree that we sort of kind of sell stuff to the same people? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So he goes, okay, and would you agree that, experiencing your business is probably the best way to really, that's kind of the best marketing you could ever get. Right?
Yeah.
He's like, absolutely. Print doesn't pull like it used to. Other types of marketing, they're expensive. And so he said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I said, and the other thing he said was, are you running at full capacity? And they both agreed they were running around 50-60% capacity. They said, well, if that's the case, then our unused capacity, we're going to use that for our marketing. That's like our best marketing dollar of all. And so they came up with a strategy of letting each other's clients experience their business, their other businesses. Okay, so not too earth-shattering at this point, but the way they set it up was really, really cool. So the restaurant owner got $100 massage gift certificates from the day spa, and he took them in, and if his client spent $150 or $200, then the server at the end of the night would give him this really nicely appointed envelope with this gift certificate in it, and a thank you from the manager, thanks for coming in, this is fantastic, please come back. And they're getting a legitimate $100 gift certificate, which, when you think about it, if you're actually giving away your unused capacity, is costing that other business almost nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But this is where our small-mindedness, just call it what it is, gets in the way.
Yeah.
Because we're going, whoa, wait a second, I can't do that. I'm going to go broke doing this. And they fail to recognize that unused capacity, they flush it down the toilet every day, and they'll never get it back.
Yeah.
It's like the hotel that rents 50% of the rooms on average. Those other 50 rooms, they'll never be able to rent those room nights again, ever.
Yeah, yeah.
So why not leverage them and turn them into your marketing, right?
Yeah.
So we would work with businesses that had a high level of perishable, we call it a perishable resource, or unused capacity. And we showed them how to package that up and then collaborate with another business. And so the restaurant was rewarding loyalty with spa gift certificates, and the spa was rewarding loyalty with restaurant gift certificates. And they were going back and forth, and they just filled each other's business up with qualified, right, clients that had money, that were proven they were going to spend money, right? Like it checked every box, right? So I used the example of a restaurant and a day spa. Use whatever example you want. But this is where it's at. And this is happening a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of collaboration online. But where we would take it was in bricks and mortar, because there's a ton you can do with bricks and mortar businesses around that, whether it's VIP, experience exclusivity. So if you're part of a higher volume clientele, we build a club, and then we give them access to benefits from another business, and vice versa, back and forth, whether it's simply a gift certificate because you've spent X amount of dollars, or you've come in more often, or, whatever it is, however you're going to incentivize them. And here's the beauty of collaboration, right? I don't have to create that value. That's coming from your business. So I'm using something that you're going to lose anyways at the end of your day. I'm using that to reward loyalty, to up my sales in my business. At the same time, driving my clients right back to you to go and do more business, right? And vice versa. And so, so that's an example for small businesses, right? So whether you're a realtor or a mortgage broker, depending how regulated your industry is, sometimes you can do more or you can do less. But there's always it gets back to what I said earlier about, if you can help enough other people get what they want first, you can pretty much have anything you want. So we usually focus it the other way around. We focus a transaction looking for, what can I get out of this transaction? And then we'll create an offering. If you give me, I'll get. If you give me, I'll give you, which is the wrong way to approach it. And so I think that's really the theme for me, is whether it's serving on a board to be able to grow influence, to be able to get more customers, whether it's looking for, attracting the right kind of client into my business, whether it's putting partnerships together in my business model today,
Yeah.
the principle's all the same right across the board.
Yeah.
And that is that, if I can make sure that you win,
Yeah.
then I'm going to be just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Got to stop worrying about for just a minute.
Yeah.
Stop meeting, because I have needs. I definitely do.
Yeah,
Right? I've got
yeah,
questions that I've got to answer, and I've got problems I got to solve for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I can just for a second turn that around and focus on adding value to your life first,
Yeah.
authentically,
Yes.
and with real value
Yeah.
that is real and you trust, then I do that for enough people, I don't have to worry about a thing. I really don't.
Yeah. And that's becoming that center of influence, giving before you take, which is really startup grind values, which is what I talked about this evening. Yeah, coming here to make friends, not necessarily connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, tremendous. Well, thank you, Pat. I think our hour is up. Pat, thanks so much for coming out tonight and talking with us. Let's have a round of applause for Pat.
Thank you. Thank you very much.